Check, check, check.
Hello.
What's going on, Astronomicon? You guys still having a good time? Yeah, make some noise, everybody. This is a fun moment for me. I'm super nervous right now for what's about to take place. For those of you who don't know, my name is James. I'm from Dave and Chuck the Freak on 101 WRIF, as well as the Nerd Radio 101 podcast. It's weird because sitting to my right, your left, is Chuck Bean, who's typically the host of the Nerd Radio podcast. Want to say hi, Chuck?
Hi, Chuck.
There you go. So he's here as like my comic guide because he's much more knowledgeable on the topics that we're about to embark on and discuss. But thank you all so much for coming and being here today. I hope you're having a great time. I'm assuming most of you are like me, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was probably a huge part of your childhood. Growing up, you probably had the toys, watched the movies, watched the cartoon, and all that stuff. So it's a huge honor for me to be the moderator of this panel. So if you would, please make some noise for co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks. So awesome to be here. So nice to see you guys. Thanks for waiting in line to see my ugly face. No, thanks for coming.
It's a very handsome face, Kevin. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for doing whatever route, the path in life you took to create the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because it's a huge part of my childhood growing up. The toys, the cartoons, like I had it all. T-shirts, all the merchandise, bed sheets, you name it, I had it, and it's always it's a huge part of my childhood, and it's a lot of nostalgia when I look back on it, and it's a lot of fond memories. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and I thank your parents for buying all those toys
Absolutely.
back in the day.
Yes, I will. I will say, you know who you? Hey, Mom, I got to tell you something. The co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles thanks you. She'll probably get a kick out of that.
No, it's funny because Turtles have been around for 36 years now. This year, thank you. It's all your fault that the Turtles are still popular, and I still have a job. So thank you very, very much. But no, I always relate to signings today, which is young people like yourself that remember the original Turtles, to the old days when it would be like one of yourselves very much smaller and your parents standing behind you and giving me this evil eye with that look of, do you know how much money I've spent on those stupid Ninja Turtle toys, or how many Christmas Eves?
That's a familiar look.
I had to put together figure out how to put together the turtle play set or something like that. But so thank you, parents, from me.
My mom even put her craftsmanship into crafting a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Halloween costume.
That's awesome. I
Yeah,
love that.
so there's been a lot of time spent in the realm of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in my household, not just by me, but also by my parents. When you were kind of coming up with the concept of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and things were starting to take off, did you ever think that these cartoon turtles would be so relevant and so popular and still be, a popular thing almost over 30 years later?
Yeah, there's that old saying, when you show somebody what you want to do for a living, your dream job, and they say, don't quit your day job. That's when Peter and I came up with the first issue, the concept of the Turtles, and self-published the first issue. Is one of those things that I still had a regular job. I was working in a restaurant and the security things you have. So we never thought it would go past the first issue. We thought, well, maybe if we sell a couple hundred copies, that would be amazing. But this funny thing happened is you guys came along and the first issue started selling. Then it sold out. And then you started calling and writing letters and saying, hey, when are you guys going to do a second issue? And Pete and I were like, we never thought we'd get past the first issue. So that's when we started that. So yeah, we had no idea. So
huge surprise, but thankfully it happened and it worked out. I want to talk to you. So those of you who have probably already seen it, Netflix has a documentary out called "The Toys That Made Us," and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is one of the toys featured in the documentary. There's a lot with Kevin in the documentary, and I'm just curious, how did that come about? What was it like to be involved in it?
Well, first thing I'll mention is if you want to see a really good documentary on the Turtles, there's a movie these guys spent 5 years producing called Turtle Power. It came out in 2015. It was these two French-Canadian filmmakers. They mortgaged their house. They spent 5 years doing interviews with fans and voice cast and all this stuff. So what was funny is Pete and I did, a 30th anniversary signing. We hang out. We email each other. We did this 30th anniversary documentary and all this stuff. So then Netflix works on the show, and they say they're going to bring Eastman and Laird back together for the first time, and we were like, really? Because we never were really separated. We had a disagreement a few years ago. But no, I love that series, and they did a good job, and it was sort of one of those things that there were some inaccuracies about the series, like I don't know where Springvale, Maine is. They keep saying I was born in Springvale, Maine, and I was not. There was a bunch of other things like, really?
Set the record straight. Where were you born?
Exactly.
Where were you born then? If that was
Portland, Maine. It's like
Portland, Maine. Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Portland, Maine, and even the guy that was doing the interview, he question one. He said, "So, tell me about Springvale, Maine." I go, "I don't know where it is. I know it's in Maine somewhere, but I was born in Portland, Maine." And it's funny because they put it on Wikipedia that I was born in Springvale, and I went on so many times to change it to Portland, and somebody would always change it back to Springvale.
You got to find out who that anonymous user is.
So they then blocked me from Wikipedia.
You got blocked from Wikipedia for trying to set the record straight,
Yes.
trying to make Wikipedia more accurate.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
We will not let him be born in Portland, Maine. Okay.
The world demands that you were born in Springville.
But no, it was an interesting series, and I hope you enjoyed it. But it was great to see Pete again, and we had a good time. After we did the documentary shoot, we went and got ice cream and hung out.
Are you guys possibly tossing any ideas together of co-creating anything else?
I think, for both of us, we were so lucky and blessed with the Turtles that, even because I sold my original interest in the Turtles to Pete in the late 90s, and then he went on to produce that awesome 2000 series, I called the Fox Kids series, which was one of my favorites. And then he sold to Viacom and then officially retired. And then Viacom brought me back in to work on the new cartoon series and the comic books and stuff like that. And so Pete and I have talked a bunch, even despite what Netflix says. We talked a bunch about working on some other ideas together, and he's just happy to be retired. But what's really interesting, and if you guys are reading any of the comic websites and stuff, is I found this story. It was a full story that Peter and I wrote in 1987, set 30 years in the future. So it was the super real futuristic story set in 2017. Or 3 years ago. But I found this complete story that we had in our archives, and so I talked to Pete a bunch of times. I said, "Hey, I'd like to, reimagine this a little bit, taking all the structural points that we did." And I said, "Do you want to help?" And he said, "Well, let me think about it," and eventually said, "I'm just not up to it." And so Tom Waltz, who wrote 100 issues of the IDW Turtle comic series that we worked on together, we're adapting it. So it's going to be 5 issues, 40 pages each, starting in July. It'll be bi-monthly, but it is based in heavy detail on an original story we wrote 36 years ago. So
very
it's
cool.
pretty exciting.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So it's cool to have a piece for the past and then come into fruition in the future.
Yes, I know. That was the weirdest part about it, is because we'd love to work together, but it's one of those things. Yeah, this was meant to be savored and saved until this.
It's like when a band has a demo from way back in the day.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's a treat. So I think you guys will dig it. So.
Sure. There's been a ton of different interpretations over the last 30 years of the Ninja Turtles. I'm wondering, do you have a specific favorite? Do you have one that you're like, that's the Turtles I had in my head?
Well, obviously with full respect, of course, to the original series, Peter and I, and I just feel like I can speak for both of us, is that we dearly love that first Turtle movie, the 1990. Steve Barron directed, Todd Langdon wrote it, Jim Henson did the costumes, and to us, we love this so much because we were obviously in full control of everything that was done with the Turtles at this time. So when they softened a lot of edges on the Turtles for the cartoon series and the toy line, we had full approval, we had full say, including, it was Peter's idea for the different color bandanas, which was a great idea. So by the time we got to do the movie, the toys were very successful, thanks to you guys, and the cartoon series was very successful. And so we were pretty scared going into the movie, but Steve Barron, who did just, again, such a masterful job directing it, he said, I love so much of the structural and the edgy and the meaty story bits from the original black and white series, but I love the humor in the cartoon series, and I think he really split it right in the middle where it got something that serviced both. So I always lean to that first movie as my favorite Turtle movie of all time. It was great, yes. So that was a treat. And then more recently, I would say the 2012 animated series that Nickelodeon did was executive produced by a guy named Ciro Neely. And Ciro grew up in Pennsylvania. His dad owned a pizza place called Angelo. So he grew up eating pizza, reading Turtles, drawing Turtles. And so when he took over the creative head of Nickelodeon on the series, you'll see lots of homages to the original Mirage series and the comic series, and plus there's some really other crazy stuff that he did in there. So this is a really fun series if you want to check it out.
I'm glad you brought that series up because I absolutely love that series as well.
great.
There's so many Easter eggs in that series.
Yes.
Which leads to the other thing I wanted to ask you. One of my first, I was also a huge Ninja Turtles fan growing up, but one of my first exposures to it was the Palladium Games tabletop role-playing game, where everyone else was discovering Dungeons and Dragons first. I was like, this turtle game looks awesome. And you guys did a bunch of art for it, too.
Yes. Yeah.
How much of that were you guys giving them, or how much of that were they being like, hey, we need a piece for this character and we need a piece for this?
Great question, too, because that was officially I think it came out in 1985, the original first version, and it was the first license. This is before we had any conversations with any toy companies or anything. And Kevin Eastman from Palladium Books approached us and said, I love the Turtles and I want to do something. So it was really collaborative that they said, so he said, here's the structure. And he sort of showed us the role-playing game formula that he wanted to use to map the fights and all that kind of stuff. He said, so we need X amount of these kind of mutants, X amount of these kind of mutants, and we need this kind of stuff. And so Pete and I developed a lot of the original concepts and we're thrown by Kevin, and it's a great, well, how about this, could you add that or add that
So
to
like the Terror
mix?
Bears and the Doctor.
Love the Terror Bears. It was awesome. And,
I was so hyped when they showed up in that cartoon. They were beavers, but I was like, I know what that is.
Well, that was, again, Ciro's thing. Ciro fought to get the Terror Bears in there, and they just wouldn't do it. They were afraid of lawsuits, so we ended up doing that. Was it Terror Beavers or Time? Yeah. But no, that was, I really loved that game, and even Pete and I we felt that we loved the structure and the format. We wanted to add a special story that you could only get in the game for comic book fans. So that was a blast. But good question.
That's cool. Go ahead.
So everybody's kind of changing with the times, and they're trying to get more modernized and things like that. And a lot of things is inclusions of like different cultures and genders and stuff. And I know either recently or coming soon, there's going to be an inclusion of a female Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
Yep, good. Yeah, just came out. It just it was we started. Just to give a little frame of reference, that I worked on a live action series that I know a lot of you guys really love. And one of the things that I love strong female characters, and so we added a female turtle to the live action series. And it was, in retrospect, looking back, that was really sort of like, hey, here's a brand new version of the Turtles, and now they have different costumes, and there's a girl turtle, and a lot of fans were resistant of that. But Tom and I, as we were going through, because it's been, I think, 2011 we started the IDW series. Like each year, we kept looking for an opportunity to bring in characters that made sense, but we were always highly focused on story first, and then we'll see how it blends together. And around issue 51, we brought in a female character, an assassin, the foot assassin named Jenica, and we intended to only have her for a couple issues, and then we'd sort of phase her out and do something else. But she became really popular early on with the fans, and so as we continued to build her character arc, we ended up bringing her more into the turtle family once Splinter took over the foot. And so then Tom and I, because we wanted a girl turtle to the series, so we said, this was a character that you all know. This is the one you've already like her, and relate to her as part of the turtle team, the turtle crew. And so as we were getting closer to, so it was about 20 issues ago, almost 2 years ago, we knew that we were going to add it to the series, and it happened finally in issue 95, which just came out middle of last year, and issue 100 came out in December. So she's just now part of the family, and so it's been really well received. I hope you guys love her as much as we do, because we wanted to stay part of the family. So, but great question.
Very cool. So I know a lot of times, like artists and things, or writers, there's people in their lives that kind of inspire them for certain characters. Were there certain people in your lives that inspired either like different characters within the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle realm or any of the characters themselves?
Yeah, it definitely. It's sort of it was really a melting pot. Being Pete and I being big fans and geeks back in those days when it wasn't such a pleasant term that it is now. But we digested everything, comic books and Star Trek and Star Wars and everything. So there were, bits and pieces of influences all over the place that came in. For example, Casey Jones was created in 1985. In 1986, John Carpenter put out a movie called Big Trouble in Little China, which I love this movie. And Kurt Russell played the role of Jack Burton. And I just thought, here's this big, wishing to do well, knucklehead, that always wants to do the right thing. but always messes up or makes poor decisions. Every time I wrote Casey Jones after that, I always wrote him. I said, "What would Jack Burton do?" when I think of Casey. But even closer to home is there's a artist that was part of Mirage Studios named Steve Levine, longtime colorist, longtime artist, a longtime friend. I went to high school with him. In high school, he was like our version of Robin Williams. He was like, when you come up with a jokey topic and then you beat it to death, and there's nowhere you could go. You've ruined this topic completely. That was usually Steve's starting point. He would then go further, and he'd be like rolling in the floor. So he was my basis. I was thinking, what would Steve do when I was writing Michelangelo? And Peter Laird inspired Donatello, in my opinion. He was like, I remember the first time he bought a Commodore 64 computer, and I said, these are never going to take off, bro. Let's just forget it. But he was always the techno guy, the geeky guy. He had a Casio calculator watch and stuff like that. So whenever I wrote Donatello, I think of Peter
I can
Laird.
absolutely see it.
So does Steve from high school know that he inspired the character?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah? How did he take that? Was he cool with it? Was he?
Yeah. He's still, he was with the company for, he's still doing stuff for Nickelodeon. Was still hiring, but he would do a lot of the licensing art and stuff like that. But he was like, he's like, yeah, Michelangelo. But he totally did.
That's all. I wish I could have that claim to fame. That would be amazing. It's probably one of my favorite characters in the whole, the realm of the world of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
You could be Raphael. You're cool but rude.
Yeah, but Michelangelo's a party dude.
That's true.
Couple more questions to get to. In your eyes, what's your biggest, what achievement with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles do you think is your greatest achievement with those guys, with those characters?
Well, it's hard because the biggest achievement was for us is when I first met Peter Laird, we bonded over something immediately, and that was our love and respect for Jack Kirby. And Jack Kirby, I know most of you know who he is. If you don't, he's basically created or co-created most of the Marvel Universe with Stan Lee. And so we both grew up as kids wanting to be Jack Kirby, and so we wanted to draw comics full time. So, I still remember clearly telling my parents I'm going to be a cartoonist like Jack Kirby when I grew up, and they had that mortified look on their face, like, oh my God, this.
I know that look. I got the same look from my parents. I'm like, I'm going to be in radio.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, we got one of those kids that's never going to move out of the
Yep.
basement.
They're like, great. Well, you better take their college fund and just put it into.
I still live in my parents' basement, coincidentally. No, but it was so when we did issue 1 and it sold out thanks to you guys, and then when we started in issue 2 and we were waiting for the orders to come in for the issue, and it was 15,000 copies, which was phenomenal back in those days. Still is actually. And so Pete and I did this quick calculation on his Casio calculator watch. We figured if we did 6 of these comics a year, we could make enough money to pay our rent, eat all the macaroni and cheese we want, and draw comics full time. And so that was really the moment the dream came true for us, is that we were drawing comics full time, and that was a childhood dream come true. And here I am at age 58 this year, and thanks to you guys, I still get to live that childhood dream every day. I get
That's
it.
awesome.
So
Congratulations.
So it's been a blessing. So yes, thank you.
We'll take some audience questions in just a minute. We got a couple more, and then we'll hit the crowd. So if you guys have some questions, think about them. We have Chuck out there in the crowd with the mic. He'll find you. But I have one more, and I don't know if Chuck Bean here has any other questions he wants to ask. But do you have a favorite character that you either had a hand in creating within the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or like a character that maybe you didn't really have much input in, but you just love?
Oh, that's tough because, especially in the early days, Peter and I did so much of the structural foundation. We only did 15 issues in total together, where we were literally sitting in the same room passing pages back and forth. But we oversaw all the other aspects of the Turtles. So there's everything from watching how we originally envisioned the Ultrons in the black and white series become Krang in the animated series, which I love Krang. The collaboration was such that, I had the first concept for Casey Jones, but Pete added the golf bag, which completed that character. So there was always this wonderful give and take. But there's so many, and especially I like the 2012 series, not only for the invention, the reinvention of characters, classic ones like Casey Jones or Slash, or the Krang, how they brought them in, or Kirby was a character we did. But my favorite was Ice Cream Kitty, because I did the voice of Ice Cream Kitty. So I was like, That was one of my favorite things because Ciro loved the Michelangelo Christmas special that we did back in the Mirage days, where Michelangelo finds a stray cat and takes it home and becomes part of the family. And so Ciro wanted to pay homage to that, but they had asked me before. They said, we want you to do a voice of some good guy character, some bad guy character. And so when they showed a picture of the development of Ice Cream Kitty at Comic-Con, I said, I want to be Ice Cream Kitty. And they go, no, we'll come up with something better. I was like, no, damn it, I want to be Ice Cream Kitty. But I just love the idea. It's like, all I had to do was meow, and that was it. But it was the funniest thing that I could be Ice Cream Kitty. So
That's awesome.
I love the idea that there were serious discussions over, well, do we have to let Kevin be Ice Cream Kitty? No, he really
I
wants
had to
be
go
Ice
up the
Cream Kitty.
executive. He wants.
He took it straight to the top.
He even printed up a shirt that said "I'm Ice Cream Kitty," and he makes his wife wear one that says "I'm with Ice Cream Kitty." It was a whole thing.
Right.
Oh my God.
So, as we've been mentioning, it's been about a little over 30 years that the Ninja Turtles have existed, and you're working on the IDW books now. You've got
Yes.
Sophie Campbell doing the art on those. And
She's fantastic.
Yeah, I love her work on that. What is it like this far removed from you and Peter doing the original books to see so many different artistic interpretations of the Turtles? And when it comes to the people that work on the books, I know you have a lot of input on the book too. Have you ever given anybody any notes?
Well, it depends. There was in the early days because just to set the foundation briefly is that when we were growing up reading comic books, and we all remember that you might have one writer, and back in especially the Marvel and DC House style days, you'd have a particular writer or an artist, and they'd team up for say a year or two of issues. Then they would change to a new art team, and so we were sort of aware of other art teams doing their versions of the character under the house rules. But some we liked more than others. I mean. I still remember Daredevil was one of my favorite all-time characters, and I still remember when this new penciler showed up named Frank Miller on Daredevil 158, and it's like, well, this guy's pretty good. Right. And then in the early days of Mirage, we would have, when Peter and I got busier and busier, because we oversaw every aspect of the animated shows, we helped write, co-write, approved everything that was going on in all licensing aspects, and so we started bringing in other artists to do it. Some of the original, Jim Lawson, Ryan Brown, Steve Levine, those guys, which we loved, and then we bring in some additional artists. A few were just there was a few no's only that when they went too heavy and too edgy. Because Pete and I never, because people look back at those original black and whites and go, oh, those are really dark and edgy, and it's like. They tonally were that way, but we never did you didn't see a lot of heads flying off, or was this, we felt like you'd say like a Star Wars or an Indiana Jones movie, you had action and you had violence and you had adventure, but a lot of it was just sort of just off camera a little bit, which we felt, you didn't need to go there to the gore part of it. So throughout all these, all the years, it's just been great to see different versions of artistic versions of the Turtles, whether it be in entertainment like the 2012 series or those movies, the Michael Bay movies.
Different's a nice word for it.
Some versions we like better than the others. But what's been so fantastic is I've always been, especially the last 9 years, been focused mainly on the comic series. And what's been so exciting to me is when you think after all these years, is there another story, is there anything left untapped? Is there a place we can still go? And you have these awesome writers, Paul Allore, God, there's so many of them. But the main one, my best friend and I'm the biggest fan of Tom Waltz, who literally wrote all of 100 issues of the series. So it's great to see those other versions, and it's actually inspiring. And what's even more funny is most of the kids that we work with on the series, like Sophie or Matthias Santucolo or Dan Duncan or Corey Smith, all these kids are half my age and they draw better than I do, which is, so I have to, bring my A game every time if I'm going to be in there with them. So they show me respect and I try to keep up with them.
Can you beat the original Ninja Turtles game?
I never have.
On the Nintendo?
Dude, I tried so. And it's like, I was so glad when they finally came out with the arcade game, because then you could at least play with
Oh, the arcade game is so good.
But no, I could never, I could barely survive. I never got through the water level. It killed me every time. And I was like,
Chuck Bean, he'll show you the ropes. He knows how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm great at that game.
But I think now's the time we'll open it up to the crowd. If you guys have any questions, you want to put your hand up. Chuck, you want to come up to the front here?
I had a quick one before I have a quick one before I take anybody out there. For the first time in 25 years, you're going to be collaborating with Peter Laird on a project that I know you just posted the front cover of some pages for. What can you tell the people here at Astronomicon about The Last Ronin.
The Last Ronin. Touched on it briefly earlier on, but it is an exceptionally cool idea that Peter and I wrote the story in 1987. It was set 30 years in the future, and when I found it and dusted it off, because I'm they call it archivist, but I'm bordering on a hoarder. I save everything, especially the early stuff. And I had sent all these notes to Peter probably a year or so ago. It's about 20 pages of notes, which was basically a beginning, middle, and end of this story idea that we had. And we had a bunch of conversations about working together on it, and he just kind of felt better that he's retired and he wants to stay retired. So Tom Waltz and I are going to adapt it, but we are taking the approach with this story with respect to what the idea is. It's going to lean heavily on the original Mirage universe, obviously, but we wanted to set it in a universe kind of like when Frank Miller did Dark Knight. It was a Batman story with all the Batman characters we know and love, and it was in that Batman universe, but it wasn't set in a certain timeline, so we didn't have to follow a specific set of rules. So it's going to be a turtle story, 200 pages. Andy Coons, the artist that's going to be doing it over my layouts. Tom and I are writing it, and we're adapting it. And it's going to be edgier than anything we've done before.
So a little bit of John Wick
yes.
with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles
yes.
coming this summer, correct?
That's exactly.
Make some noise for that. New ultra-violent, adult, mature, not quite teenage turtles anymore.
Absolutely. Thanks.
First, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share your journey.
Oh, thank you.
My question is this: did you write as a child? And second, what would you suggest to future writers?
So what was the last part?
What would you suggest to writers that are writing now or plan to take their ideas to print?
Just become manically, crazily obsessed and just do it all. No, no, it was interesting. It's like, because I get to spend a lot of time at these shows. My wife, Courtney, and I, we do about 15, 16 shows a year. And I love meeting you fans, of course, the most, and inspiring artists and writers and things. And I tell them, it's kind of like, when I was growing up, I was obsessed with comics, and I was drawing all the time. I was writing all the time. I had so many great drawings taken by English teachers or math teachers over the years. But it was something I really wanted to do, and I dreamed about doing, and was lucky enough to have my dream fulfilled, thanks to you guys again. But what I say to young people is, like, if you like music, if you like sports, if you like writing, you like drawing, you have to find a way, and I know it can be hard juggling all the things you have to do in life, to apply yourself, whether it's even 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes every day to what your craft. If you write. If you love baseball, you play baseball. You have to follow it, because that's the only way you're going to get better. And it's easy to get distracted, and it's easy to get pulled away. Life pulls you from homework to relationships to chores to everything. But you have to stick with it and stay true to it. And then the other big thing is there can be a lot of peer pressure. And it's like when I was growing up, I was like, again, they used to call me a geek, and it wasn't in a positive sense in any way, shape, and form. And I remember me and my friend Jim McNorton, who was, I think in 7th grade, was over 6 feet tall. So, and then David Peabody. So you got me and Jim McNorton and David, but we would sit in the corner of the lunchroom, and we would have the best time ever. We just, we don't care if they laughed at us, they made fun of us, whatever. But we would write, we wanted to draw comic books, and the only way to do it was to do it. And you had to sort of overcome a lot of obstacles. So whatever you dream about, you just really got to stay true and, stand up to your doubters, Even, and I actually wrote this in I'm working on this project called Drawing Blood, which is kind of set in the world of comic books, and it's got a lot of stuff. And one of the anecdotes I put in there it's kind of semi-autobiographical. But I remember my mom coming up to my room, and I think it's probably like 10 or 11 years old, and she was like, and again, as always, I was in my room drawing or writing or doing something, and I hadn't done my chores that day, and I hadn't done that. She just sort of looked at my drawings and was like, she goes, "You better be good at that, because you're not good at anything else." And I was like, holy shit.
Wow, harsh.
Yeah, but then I thought about it. I go like, okay, got it.
You're supposed to love me, Mom. Jeez.
Then she hit me and kicked me and threw me down the stairs. No, she didn't.
I got another question.
Hey, Kevin. My question is, I absolutely adored the Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie that came out
Thank
last
you.
year. And one of the best things was during the credits, all those comic book covers of the mixtures. Did you get to work on any of those covers that were shown in the credits?
No, and Michelle, hi, nice to see you guys. What was the director's name? I forget. Is it always goes out of my mind. Not, he's fantastic. I apologize to the director because we went in a bunch of times when they were working on the films, and he had this idea, this concept to do these great recreations of classic covers using turtle characters and stuff, and it was let's say, you know, cover after cover after cover, and they were so cool. But one Easter egg, which I think you probably know about, but one of the Easter eggs I got to do is they called me up, one of the producers, and said, we want to have you do a couple Easter eggs in the film. And the one that worked was that scene where Mikey's drawing on the board, and he's talking about the cool factor of Batman. Well, he's got a card, it's got this, and he's got that, and he looked like that. Well, those are my drawings. And so, but I had to draw him like Michelangelo. So I actually had our son, Shane, who's 13 years old. And so at that time, it was 2 years ago. It took about 2 years to produce it. So he was like 9 years old. So I had him do a bunch of drawings of Batman. And I just traced over his drawings and sent them in. So those are my drawings on the board. But I love that. Yeah. So I love that series. And I had a great time. We've done 3 episodes of the Turtles Batman crossover series. And it's been an absolute blast. So. Jake. It was Jake. It is Jake.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, back here. I brought my own mic, by the way.
Oh, look at that.
All right, so I hate to put you on blast like this, and I'm going to apologize in advance for my question. So I watched Toys That Made Us, right? And there's a section in there where you guys are describing your apartment, Mirage Studios, and you're saying how you were creating the actual drawings, the very first drawings. And you said,
yes.
Oh yeah, we were goofing around upstairs and we were just doing that. Care to expand on the goofing around? Because it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and, well, they're green. And I'm curious to know if, you know, I don't want to put you on blast like that.
Are you asking if he was allegedly under the effects of marijuana?
In the most 2020 politically correct way.
No, I love it because in the appropriate, the correct answer is actually we couldn't afford it back in those days.
I can sleep at night.
No kidding, we couldn't. No, we were seriously broke. But no, it was and actually, as the story goes, and again, there's if you watch the Turtle Power documentary, which goes into not only correct but a lot of more detail of the early days and things like that. But Pete used to watch, in my opinion, some of the worst shows on television. And if you're fans, I apologize. But he loved like T.J. Hooker. Really, he's like T.J. Hooker, you know, William Shatner as this cop with his fake hair and the whole thing and all that. And then, you know, the A-Team and have other shows. So while he was watching his favorite shows, I thought it was my important duty as his best friend to annoy him as much as possible. So one night he was watching an episode, and so that's where I had this idea. I was thinking, like, if Bruce Lee was an animal, what would be the stupidest animal he would be? Fast-moving martial artist, slow-moving turtle. So I actually did this drawing. It's on the hat. So I did this turtle standing upright. He had a mask on. He had nunchucks strapped to his arm, and I put it on his desk. I said, this is going to be the next big thing, Ninja Turtle. And he laughed appropriately. So literally that same night, this was like November 1983, so he did a sketch, improved some things, changed some things, and I was like, well, if one, why not a group of them? So then that same night, I penciled 4 turtles, each with different weapons, and it had a Ninja Turtles title block in place. And so I did it in pencil. When he inked it in, he had a Teenage Mutant to the title. And we looked at this thing and said, this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen.
You can see my question, though, right?
Yes, we have to come up with exactly. You would
brilliant.
assume
Absolutely
there were
brilliant,
other,
by the way.
You know, hallucinogenic influences that would inspire this, but nah, we were broke, man.
Well, speaking of influences, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles inspired a whole generation of anthropomorphic superheroes.
Yes.
Now, of all your Battletoads and your sewer sharks, did you have a personal favorite knockoff of your IP?
The first one was adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters, which was absolutely fantastic. It was really well drawn. I loved it. They did 4 or 5 issues, and then there was mildly microwave prepubescent gophers. There was one with kangaroos. Even Marvel put out a couple ads, and I think they backed off the trend. I think the trend was starting to wane, but they had adult thermonuclear samurai elephants, and there was a few others. But I think we counted about 20, 21 adjective, noun inspirations. But at the same time, Pete and I were inspired by guys like Dave Sim, who his first comic called Cerebus, published in 1976, was a parody of Conan the Barbarian featuring an aardvark. So he had an aardvark that acted like Conan the Barbarian, drawn like Barry Smith back in the day when Roy Thomas and Barry Smith were doing it, running around hacking people up. And he got a lot of notice from it, but he used that as a jumping off point into a more detailed and intense storyline that ran 300 issues. So yeah, we basically ripped off everybody we liked in comics and put it into Blender and created the Turtles, and so we assumed that they were doing the same thing. So
Yeah, turnabout is fair play. Any other questions?
You got time for a couple more?
Oh, wait, the kid up there?
yeah, what time are they throwing us out? 3?
We got about
We started-
5 more
We got
minutes.
about 12 minutes.
Oh, good. We can play good. Nope.
How many copies of the first comic do you own?
Not enough. In fact, I was thinking I should print up a bunch more, but no.
If anyone should be allowed, it's you, right?
No, that's a really good question. And in those days, so we borrowed enough money from my uncle. We printed $1,200 from my uncle. We printed 3,000 copies, and I think we sold about 2,500 of them. 2,600 of them went out actually into the comic marketplace and that stuff. So Pete and I kept a bunch, but it was a black and white $1.50 silly idea that we had. So cousins got them for Christmas and aunts and uncles, and we just gave them to friends and family and just said, here. So I think we had probably 4 or 5 maybe that I kept, and it was one of those that we said, we should put a few in a plastic bag and put it away somewhere. So I've only got a couple, but I think one sold for like $90,000 this year or something.
Wow, that's even better than putting money in a bank account. Got a couple more? Any more, Chuck?
I know you mentioned that the original movie was like your favorite of all of them. What was it like for you, like the first time you saw the Turtles like in person? Like, what was that? That had to have been bizarre to see like the costumes and all of that.
It's almost
I actually have a
indescribable. That's a great
follow-up
question. Because what was interesting is that in those days when we were working on that, we still had, for a long time in the early Turtles history of the movies, that we worked on 300 cartoon shows. We worked on all the 3 movies. We had full approval of so many different aspects of the Turtle license. And so when we teamed up with Steve Barron and Todd Langdon and worked on the script, it was a script that we loved and we approved. Jim Henson's Creature Shop at the time was based out of London, so we were getting like every day there'd be an express mail with photographs and different things that they were showing as they were building the costume for us to approve. And so we had never seen the full person in a turtle costume until we actually get down on set, and they shot it in a town in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I remember this was Pete and I, we drove down, they had just started shooting. It's in Wilmington, North Carolina, like I said. It was July, and it was, I think, 110 degrees with like 150 degrees, 150% humidity. And we pull in and be walking through this maze back to the back lot where they were doing a night shoot with an action piece. And if you ever saw Hollywood backset, as you're approaching it, it looks like a kind of construction zone. It doesn't look like anything. And then you kind of come around this corner, and then it's all of New York City lit up just like you're walking down a city in the village in New York City. And we're like, holy smokes, and there's lights, and there's foot soldiers practicing over there, and people are running around lighting this and spraying this down. And then we come around this corner, and there's all 4 turtles, and Michelangelo's got a sombrero on. He's dancing and stuff. We just literally froze in our tracks and just stared, jaws hit the ground, and just said it was the most mind-blowing thing that they actually brought our characters to life. And it was, unimaginable. We were just so blown away. So it was pretty rad. So good question.
We've got an army of juvenile cosplayers amassing behind this door. So if you guys want to wrap it up, maybe some final thoughts, some comments.
Well, do we have maybe one more question?
One more question?
One more?
All right, so you were talking about how it was inspired by other comics that you guys liked.
Yeah.
Now, there's a rumor that I heard that the ooze that mutated the turtles was the same ooze that made Matt Murdock blind. Is this true?
Say that again? I missed the part left.
The ooze that made the turtles mutants, is that the same ooze that made Matt Murdock blind?
Absolutely. Yes. No, we ripped that off completely. No. No, it was one of those things that we did. We picked so many of our favorite things in comic books, whether, I was a big fan of Jack Kirby did a book called Commandy, the Last Boy on Earth, which was kind of based on a Planet of the Apes style universe. So they had these mutant animal characters running around. Ninjas, of course, from Frank Miller, and there was so many different aspects of formulaic superhero stereotypes that we brought into the story, inspired by. But Daredevil was a particular favorite of mine. And when Pete and I were trying to come up with the origin story, we've thrown out, again, really silly ideas. And I said, you know what? After that canister hit Matt Murdock near the eyes and made him blind and the radioactivity helped him become Daredevil, they never said what happened to the canister. So our origin story is pretty much the same thing. It hits this young boy near the eyes, and then the canister continues bouncing down the street, and there's this unfortunate kid we later named Chet that was standing there with a glass terrarium precariously close to a sewer opening. So the canister hits the terrarium, 4 turtles in it, smashes it, they go down to the sewer where there's a rat. So that was it. And right down to, in Frank Miller's comic book series, they had a evil ninja clan he was battling called the Hand. So we have the Foot. And then in the Daredevil series, both the comic book and the one they did on TV was Daredevil had a mentor named Stick. We have Splinter. So we did just enough so Stan Lee didn't sue us. Unfortunately, he didn't. But that was highly influenced on, and again, we assume maybe at the most a couple hundred people might read this comic book, so we weren't that worried. Didn't plan on being here 36 years later, ripping off Marvel comics and stuff.
Hey, it worked out. Thankfully it did, because
they didn't
like I
sue
said,
us, and we're still.
yeah, my childhood would have been way different if it didn't work out. So that's really all the time we have. We got the cosplayers coming in here. Thank you all so much for coming. Do you have any other events that you're doing that you want to?
Yes, thank you, Astronomicon. Thank you for making us feel so welcome. We love you guys. This is awesome. But we're signing from 5 to 7. So if we missed a question or anything like that, you get a chance to come by. But we're signing, and then we're going to be here all day tomorrow as well. So.
Yeah, it's 5 to 7. He'll be here all day tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for coming out. Kevin, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Astronomicon, make some noise for the creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman, and Chuck and James from Dave and Chuck the Freak, WRIF, right here in Detroit Murderous.